Ubisoft is going back to the roots of the series with Assassin's Creed Mirage. However, I found that it combines many new and old formulas as well as new features in its latest entry. I recently got to play the game early thanks to a remote streaming session Ubisoft was kind enough to invite me to. So here are 10 huge things that I learned from it as well as my initial impressions. Also keep in mind that this is still early footage, so things can still change until launch. But right from the get-go, I really enjoyed the map size of AC Mirage. Instead of endless expanses of nothingness, Ubisoft went for even more urban density. Baghdad feels packed, lots of buildings, lots of NPCs everywhere, and there was even a bazaar area with big crowds of NPCs I was able to visit and walk by with a ton of things to buy. This was also just a remote session. I was able to play hands-on via streaming at only 1080p, but even so, the game looked really good. It kind of reminds me a bit of the vibrancy and the desert colors of AC Origins, which I also really liked. But the map layout is quite awesome. I can't show it because of embargo reasons, though it really reminded me of AC Syndicate for some reason. As you synchronize more areas, you have a more detailed view, kind of like a 3D Google Earth effect that lets you zoom in and see the buildings in greater detail. The city is also broken down into multiple large districts, and this is where the synchronization towers help to reveal more info about how they look and what you find inside of them. So stuff like number of gear chests, artifacts, and many more collectibles and activities to complete are going to be shown in a distinctive menu. However, it's not just the city that's playable, but also a huge area all around it. So there were a couple of zones I was able to visit, including some of these wetlands just outside of the city by the Tigris River. And I also got to visit another smaller town towards the end of my play session, in which I had to grab a horse since it was quite further away. And again, cinematic camera is making a comeback, letting you enjoy the scenery as you travel. Of course, this bigger focus on urban density means parkour gets used a lot more. Basim is fairly agile and free run lets you quickly skip from obstacle to obstacle. In terms of movement speed and animation flow, I would say Mirage is situated somewhere between AC Origins, with a bit of Unity, however much closer to Origins in terms of simplicity. So I wouldn't say it's getting anywhere close back to the roots of the series like AC1 and 2, at least from this perspective. There were a few smooth animation transitions when I was passing certain obstacles that kinda reminded me of Unity. However, it's definitely closer, at least in my opinion, to the simplified Origin controls. Everything else is the same: the sprint, the free run up, jump, crouch, all from the modern AC layouts. Now, combat also has its own flow since Basim uses a sword and a dagger. I found parries, which you can do with a Q on the keyboard, really powerful and a bit more skillful. So if you press Q at the right moment before an enemy lands a hit on you, this completely staggers them and lets you immediately follow up with an instant assassination. Attacks are also pretty simple, either using left click for normal attack chains or shift click for heavy ones. However, it definitely feels like fighting big groups in straight melee combat requires skill and good timing, so generally speaking, it's better to play stealthy and take down your targets silently. Enemy camps felt just as always. You pick up your eagle, in this case Enkidu, to mark up your targets from above before going in. Inside, you can take down any unsuspecting target while nobody is looking and hide it in the tall grass so nobody finds it later on. However, there are moments when more hands-on strategy is required. Many of them advanced enemy camps have a marksman which actually immediately shoots an arrow to prevent your bird from doing any recon. So in this case, you'll have to resort to pure OG assassin tactics and go in semi-blind yourself and try to get close to the marksman so that the aerial reconnaissance becomes possible once again. And from that point on, again, I would assume it resumes to how it was before, but there are many more aspects of the combat that we're going to discuss in just a little bit. So one of them is actually the assassination focus. This is something that I really wanted to test out. It's kind of like this chain assassination that Basim can pull off by spending the focus bars on the bottom left corner of the screen. So this lets you mark up nearby targets, one for each available focus bar, and then trigger the animation to quickly teleport between each one and instantly take them down with your hidden blade. It definitely felt OP since it makes it count as a stealth kill, so enemies even just a bit further away, in this case, did not even hear me. Now, it's likely as we level up we might get more than 3 focus bars, letting us pick off more targets. However, one thing I want to point out is that there is a limited range on this ability. To truly mark all the targets, you will have to be in range and cannot just do it from anywhere else. You have to get quite close, so maybe a bush nearby. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to mark all of the targets that the number of focus bars have will permit. So there is a bit of balance to it. Now we also have the tools, and one thing that I want to point out is that it seems that we'll use skill points to unlock new tools as well as to upgrade these, though in my playthrough I already started with quite a few of them unlocked. Plus, each assassin tool has up to 3 tiers that we can further invest skill points into to get more powerful effects. As far as the tools themselves, it's nothing that we haven't seen necessarily before in AC games. So we have the throwing knife, really good for deadly ranged takedowns. We have the smoke bomb, probably the most useful to create mass confusion or even just for distracting enemies while we go in and assassinate everyone without being noticed or to plan our escape. There's also the noisemaker. This can both get used to distract enemies so that you can slip past them, and one of its upgrades even seem to cause enemies to flee in panic if thrown directly at them. So there's one other use you can get out of each of these skills. But besides these, we also had the traps. I believe this is new. You can throw it and it will start spewing a deadly poisonous gas that deals damage over time. And of course, the blow dart, though I didn't get to use this in my play session as I didn't get the chance to unlock it. Now, my play session started from a bit further into the game as I had to gather some intel and infiltrate some grand auction happening in the city. But this is also when I got introduced to a new mechanic called the investigation feature, which I found really cool. I can only show you what's not under the embargo, but in my play session I was able to uncover a lot more. So as you gather intel, find clues and extract the info out of certain targets, you get to build a case around possible assassination targets or areas of interest to infiltrate to, and so on. Another thing you can do is even bribe people, such as merchants, to find more info that can lead to bigger cases. So it almost feels like you're building like some Batman case files, except that in the AC universe, which I found really cool. But it definitely felt that the game also appeared to leave quite a bit of this to the player's discretion, should you choose to pursue certain clues or not. So there were things that I could totally ignore and maybe just go in and find stuff in my own way, maybe even accidentally. A really interesting moment was offering a bribe to a certain merchant, which only gave me a starting point for the bigger case. Again, something I could have completely skipped on, but if I chose to get it, it would have provided me a big advantage. This all led me to an enemy camp, and in this camp, I later found out more clues and orders that further pieced everything together. So the more clues you find, the more info is revealed, and it's all part of this webbing of connections in which the more you discover, the bigger the conspiracy gets. Now, this is also when I got to see the special tokens in action, as getting the intel out of the merchant involved bribing him with a special favor token. So there are 3 in total that I was able to discover, one of which is this, the merchant favor token. This is something that grants specific services and favors when shown to certain merchants. So I was able to find out a couple of these in my playthrough. One came from opening a chest I found inside of an enemy camp. Also, I found more listed on the contract board back at the hidden layer, alongside other rewards like crafting mats, but you can also randomly pickpocket these from people on the streets. But later on, I went to the bazaar and I had another option in which I could use these, in this case to permanently reduce the prices at the vendors over there by 10%. So I'm not quite sure if there's a cap to how many we can use to reduce that number, but it was implied that I could spend multiple tokens to further bring down the prices at that merchant. And that vendor specifically had some very good looking costume in there and lots more useful consumables, crafting mats and so on. So this is something that we're gonna probably have to focus on quite a bit in the full game. Besides this one, there was also the Scholar Favor token. This works in a similar way when shown to scholars and entertainers, and also are acquired from same sources like contracts, treasure chests, and pickpocketing. And there was also a final one that sounded most interesting, which is the Power Favor token. So this seems to grant specific services when shown to different officials from the city, guards, even mercenaries or rebels. So this could probably provide different gameplay advantages, maybe even combat related. Now, one thing I'm sure OG Assassin's Creed fans will likely enjoy is that there's no leveling system, but instead the Hidden One's rank is making a comeback. So no numbers next to the health bars, thank God, at least from all the gameplay I was able to play. Instead, progression in the main story, completing missions and so on will increase your rank and even provide extra skill points. So I was rank assassin in my playthrough, which is quite high, and this can help with a bunch of things. Among others, it also influences whether you'll be able to face enemies in certain territories. So you can't just stroll in and immediately assassinate an elite target as an apprentice, for example. But this also means likely no leveling gating and no mindless farming to level up just so that you can progress. Additionally, and even though I didn't see this in my playthrough specifically, it's likely that ranking up is what's going to further improve your access to more assassin's tools, maybe more HP, and definitely more outfits and higher grade missions. But there's one thing Mirage borrows from the modern era AC games, and that's the skill tree. So this is going to be a lot more tuned down from all the previous AC games, especially Valhalla, with just a bit over a dozen very condensed skills in 3 specific categories. So one of the categories is Phantom. I'm not going to show you anything because this is still strictly under embargo. However, I can talk a bit about it. So Phantom, this deals with your assassination actions like chain assassination, slowing time mid-air, but also improves your focus capacity and even lets you break fall when jumping from high places, among other things. Trickster, this is centered around using your assassination tools, stuff like recovering throwing knives, increasing tool pouch, even becoming better at pickpocketing or having an easier time finding hidden loot chests. And finally, Predator, this is where the bonuses you get for Enkidu are your bird eye view, essentially to find and highlight targets a lot easier, as well as treasures, plus even more improvements for your eagle vision to better see enemies through walls. Now, the inventory screen has been slightly simplified compared to the recent Valhalla and Odyssey and closer to the one in Origin. So there's only one slot for the entire outfit instead of multiple, like having a head, gloves, armor, feet, and so on. So the outfits are upgradable using crafting mats you find while exploring. However, the default starting one that I had in my PlayStation did not seem to have any stats. So it's not clear if leveling will provide any change outside of cosmetic improvements. But besides these, we also have 2 weapon slots, one for the sword and another one for the dagger. So for example, the ones I started with came up with some really good damage bonuses centered around the parry mechanic, providing big boosts on the following attacks after a parry. But they also had their own basic stats like damage and parry damage. Everything else for the dice, costume, and talisman, these were purely cosmetic from what I was able to tell. Outfits can have multiple dice to choose from, which I found rather varied even from the starting one. But then we have the costumes. These will override your outfits. Think of these as transmogs, and I'm expecting these to be found through completing achievements, ranking up as an assassin, and possibly others. For example, I had access to the Master Assassin costume. And finally, the talisman, a nice piece of jewelry hanging on the back. Again, the ones that I had did not provide any extra bonuses, but they seem to be acquired from attaining levels among the hidden ones, so basically ranking up. But yeah, solid impressions so far, a good amount of nostalgia coming back as I played, but still not completely leaving aside all the major progress that the series has made over the years. Of course, this is just my preliminary impression from a few hours of playthrough and not indicative of my full impressions that will follow around the game's launch. So you can expect more AC Mirage content on the channel. That's why I suggest totally subscribe if you want to see more of that, and also check out my gameplay that I posted doing a whole bunch of crazy open world stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.